Welcome back to the Start to Finish course on upgrading to .NET Core. We are currently in the module focused on the actual update of our application, and this lesson we're going to be converting our ASP.NET MVC project over to ASP.NET MVC Core. So let's go right to our source code, and this one's going to be a little bit different. So we're going to right click and reload this project. This is still the .NET Framework version. So if you go here, it's .NET Framework 4.7.2. So it's a little newer than the 4.5.2 versions of the .NET Framework from our other projects. But upgrading to an MVC .NET Core application isn't as simple as just changing our CS proj file. Now, there's a couple ways you can go about this. Since I am fine with changing the project name, I'm going to add a new project with a new name for my MVC project. If you did not want to change the project name, what I'd recommend doing is removing this. So right click and say remove, deleting that folder, and then adding a new project with the exact same name. Since we have the original application that's pre-upgrade, I would open that on a second screen. So now you have a copy of the old and the new will be empty. But since I can rename this, I'm going to do it right here. It'll just make it easier for the video to have it all in one project. At the end, I will delete this MVC UI project and just keep my new project. So that in mind, I'm going to right click on the solution and say add new project. And the reason we're doing this is because we want to have that structure set up the right way with all the settings, and then we're going to move over the code we need rather than trying to upgrade in place. So ASP.NET Core Web Application, and I want to call this something more in line with what I have for the other three projects. This gives me an opportunity to rename it to be something better named anyway. So Tracker MVC. Let's go with MVC UI, like that. So Tracker MVC UI and hit create. Now it's going to give me the question of what type of project do you want. I want .NET Core, .NET Core 3.0, and I want this to be a web application of type Model View Controller. I do want to configure for HTTPS. At this point, I do not want to authorize or add Docker support, and we don't have any authentication. I hit create, and now I have my new user interface. If I right click on here and say set as startup project, we should be able to boot this without a problem. Let's do so, just to make sure it does boot up. And we'll wait for it. The first time is going to take a little bit because it's going to restore those NuGet packages. But this is our new user interface for our UI project. It says Tracker MVC UI, and it has our basic pages from the template. If we were right click on MVC and say says startup project, notice that the reference here, under references, we do have a reference. Wow, it's in here somewhere. Right down here for Tracker library. Let's run this one. So I've made it the startup project. So I'm going to launch this one and just see what the comparison looks like. And so it's launching right here, and we get an error. It says that cannot find a file specified for the configuration manager. Okay, not a problem. We're going to stop this. Let's go to our original project and launch that one instead. So I'm going to right click on my solution and say open folder in File Explorer. Let's go up to the original and launch this instead. And hopefully this one works. It should. Let's set this as startup project and run this. So our goal here is just to see what it looks like when it's running. And there we go. So we've got it working. It, in fact, is pulling the tournament. So there's old debug and debug. So we can click on that, and if we want to go a tournament, but the tournament's not, or it's complete already, so we can't actually go to it. But we can see people. There's a list of people. It looks like Joe Smith is joe@smith.com, Mary Smith, and Bob Smith. We have our teams, and there's Tim's team, Joe's team, or Tim's team has Joe on it, Bob's team has Bob on it, and Mary's team has Mary on it. That's the reason why we have that weird matchup issue. And then prizes, we've got a whole bunch of first place prizes, the last one being the $10 prize. So it is working the way we intend it to. We can even create new tournaments if you want to. We're not going to. But so the original MVC does work. It's the upgraded one that's going to be a problem. Or using the original with the upgraded library is a problem. Not to worry though, we're going to use the updated MVC UI. But one of the things you may notice, and if you haven't used it a lot, the different versions you may not have, but I believe if we go to the scripts here and look at Bootstrap, this is version 3.3.7. That's the old project. And if we come down to our tracker MVC and go to www.root, go to JS, lib, bootstrap, dist, JS, bootstrap, it's 4.3.1. So it's a different version of Bootstrap. So that would be a significant change for us to try and upgrade a version 4 of Bootstrap. We're not going to do that. We're actually going to roll this back to version 3.3.7. Again, we're not trying to refactor everything now. We're trying to get it to work. So we'll come back to that in a minute. But notice down here on startup.cs, we have all of this ASP.NET Core goodness. So if it's in development, use developer exception page. Otherwise, use HSTS, do the HTTPS redirect. All this good stuff, authorization, routing, endpoints. These are all the good things that you get with .NET Core that you don't get in the .NET framework. And so this is different. This is much different than how our old MVC worked. So what we're going to do is use this structure and just bring over the important bits. So let's close everything out. And let's open up our home controller in the new project and go to our controllers over here and look at our home controller in the old project. So old project is home controller inherits from controller. The new project, home controller inherits from controller. Cool. In this one, we have index returns an action result. In this one, we have index returns an I action result. Well, actually, action result implements I action result, so it's okay to do that way. So in theory, what we can do is we can actually copy this action, this index action, come over here, and so now that we have that, the error goes away and our home controller looks right. Now notice it's using iLogger. That's cool. We didn't have that before. But now let's basically follow the same pattern, only it makes it a little easier here. We're going to get rid of everything in the home, the privacy, that's going to go away. Privacy goes away in our application. We don't need it. And the shared, we can leave the error page. We're going to leave that there in the model as well. But now we can come up here to our controllers, and we have the people controller, we have the prizes controller, the teams controller, and the tournaments controller. So I'm going to collapse this down and copy the whole thing. I could bring this in manually, or like the whole file itself, but I don't want to do that. Because if I do that, then my namespace will be wrong, my usings will be wonky. Let's just not do that. Instead, let's right click and say add, I'm going to say class, not a controller, just a class, and call it people controller. And the reason I say class and not a controller is because then I can just paste this whole thing in without much of a problem. I can control dot here to add the missing usings. And life is good. A controller just adds the using for the Microsoft.ASP.core.MVC up here, and it adds the controller at the end of the class. We don't need to do that if we already have that code. So there's the people controller. Now I want the prizes controller. Again, we're going to collapse this down, copy the whole thing, go to our controllers down here. Let's shrink this stuff down. And this is the prizes controller. Make sure you get that spelling correctly. So prizes controller. And again, we're going to overwrite even this public class prizes controller. And we will do our control dot, and the bottom one is add missing usings. Once that happens, everything is good. We can close both of those out. And now let's go to the teams controller. Collapse this down. Notice the pattern here. Patterns are good. That's why I'm not bouncing back and forth between controllers, views, and all the rest. I'm just doing controllers right now. So right click, add, new class. We're going to call this the teams controller. By following the same pattern and doing all of the similar things at once, then it makes it easier to remember the steps. And by making it easier to remember the steps, you make it easier to work with. Now I do have an error here. It is team MVC model. That's probably actually, yep, right there. So I should bring my models over. But I don't want to do that yet. So I'm going to leave this alone. I'll save it. And I'm going to bring over tournaments controller. And I'll probably have more of these same errors because of the models in the front end that I'm missing. And if I had thought, I probably would have, let's bring this up a little higher. Right click, add class. And this is the tournaments controller. Since I scrolled down, I'm not seeing it, but right up here in the bar it says MVC UI.controllers.tournaments controller. And then paste it in here. Scroll to the top. I'm going to do my control dot here and add the missing usings, which right now it's missing 4. And again, we're missing these models, but that's okay for now. So I've brought over my controllers. Now let's bring over my models. Models are easier, and we could just copy and paste and just change the namespaces. I think we're going to do that. So let's select all 5, or is it 5? Yeah, it's 5. We're going to copy. We're going to come down to models. And I'm going to say paste. Now, if you look at the error model, I'm going to copy this namespace, then come down to matchup model, and that's not the right namespace. I'm going to paste that namespace in. I'm going to overwrite that namespace as well. overwrite that namespace, overwrite that namespace, and overwrite that namespace as well. So I'll save all of those. I'll still have some errors. If you notice real quick, the reference right here is an error. And in fact, the selected list item control dot to add the using for Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.MVC.rendering. Takes care of that. Get rid of this reference and again add the using back in for this. We'll save that. Round status, control dot on here. Round status looks like it's a model, but I don't see it. So let's go back over to our round MVC model and look at round status. That's an enum. Aha. It's probably in helpers. Yep, helpers enum. So I'm going to copy this entire folder and paste it into the, it's going off a screen, sorry about that. I'm going to paste it in here. Wow, it's really going off the screen. These long menus. There we go. So we have helpers and enum, but that's not the right namespace. If I control dot here, I'm going to change the namespace. Control dot is your friend. Use it all the time. So now it should be that this round status can find that enum using the helpers. Cool, it can. No problems there. No problems there, and looks like no problems there. So if we do, let's do a quick build right here just to make sure that it's working correctly. It's not yet. Aha, we've got some missing using statements here. So control dot to add the using statement for that. Let's go our error list and double click control dot to add our using statement. Back to our error list, control dot to add our using statement there. Back to the error list, and now we have, let's turn out the warnings and messages. So we have 0 errors now. So I'm going to save everything. And now we have our controllers, we have our helpers, we have our models. So models, helpers, and controllers. Now we need to think about what other stuff do we need to bring in. And the biggest one is our views. Let's do this. Let's close all documents. Let's look at our home index. And then let's go down here to our view and look at our home index, since that's a comparable page. And just make sure, let's open this below. This one up here has a model coming in. That's okay. But the style here looks the same. It doesn't look like anything else has changed. So I think we can just bring down our views. So let's do that. Let's go up to our views folder. And I am going to, well, first I'm going to manually copy this one. So Control A, Control C, close it out, come down here to our home controller, Control A, backspace, Control V. Save it. Now this is going to have some problems right now because of the fact that it's looking for Bootstrap 3, and it's what all the divs, the classes for the divs are, and all the styling is based upon Bootstrap 3. And the new MVC project has Bootstrap 4, and so it won't work quite the same. It'll look ugly, but in theory, it will load. In fact, let's just, I know we're not actually running yet. We haven't moved anything else over yet, but let's set this as a startup project and just see if it does load the way we expect it to. Build succeeded, that's great. And now we have that get all object reference not set to an instance of an object. Okay, not a problem. We have a global config issue to deal with. My guess is that we haven't actually put a connection string in there. Makes sense. So we can deal with that in a minute, but let's deal with the other items in the views. So let's the people, prizes. We're going to skip over shared for a minute. Let's go people first. Copy that, paste it into views. And let's open this up and look at doing a change. Well, tracker library, no, that's going to be correct. And then this is tracker library. That's going to be correct as well. So I don't think there's any changes there as far as our namespaces. So I think we're good for people. Now let's go to our prizes. We'll copy that folder. We'll paste it onto views. And tracker library.models, that's fine. And tracker library models. I'm just checking to make sure we're not using these models here. If we're using these models here, that namespace has changed. Okay, now let's move on to, we just finished the prizes. So let's go with teams. We're just going to skip over shared. We're going to paste teams on here and check those namespaces. Aha, we've got a namespace issue. There is no MVC UI. Instead, it is tracker MVC UI.models. So that's the difference. And then this one is the correct one, so that's good. I think I saw an error here. We'll get to this whole scripts render section in a minute, but I think the error went away. So that's the only error I see now, that red. So we can call that good for now. So that's teams, and then tournaments. So I'll paste that onto views. And we'll check this, create. There's that MVC UI again. That needs to be instead tracker MVC UI. And that should resolve these other issues. So once that's loaded, notice the red dots go away, and it's only that scripts render section that's an issue. Let's go to details. That's the MVC UI again. So tracker MVC UI, save that. And this right here, round status, control dot, doesn't do anything. And it looks like it's not seeing that as possible because it's not finding the round status enum. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a using statement. So at using tracker MVC UI dot helpers. Save that, and that should pick up, it does, our round status. So that is all good. So now that's the two under tournaments. So now let's look at our view start on the old page, which just says, hey, look at layout. And our view start on our new page, which says layout is layout. So it's a little different in how it does it, but it's still pointing to underscore layout. So that's good. Let's look at our shared folder now, and let's look at that layout page. Here's the old page. And our new page is under shared. We also have underscore layout. It's different because it's using the new Bootstrap 4. So let's take our old page, we'll Control A, Control C, and go to our new page. We're going to Control A, and you know what I'm going to do? Actually, I'm going to copy this out, and I'm going to paste it into a text file. And the reason why is because there are some things in here that are different. So let's just paste this in. Then I can come back to my original layout again. Control A, Control C again. This time, Control A, wipe it out, and paste in. Because how we've done things like scripts and styles and how we do our links, those have all been improved in ASP.NET Core. So we can make some modifications there, or at least make sure they work the same way with the older style, like this action link, make sure it actually works. So we'll get there in a minute. let's look at the errors we have. We have 2 for script rendering and we have 2 for style and scripts. So we'll need to modify those. And we have that original, which right here we have, there's a style, how you link to it. And then down at the bottom, we also have, here's how to link to scripts. And here's how to have that render section. So we have our examples from the original page that we just overwrote. We'll modify these in a minute in our debugging session. But for now, that puts us in place correctly. Now we do have this edit matchup here, so let's copy that and paste it into our shared. So the paste goes off a screen if it's too low on the screen, and it is pretty low. So paste, there we go, edit matchup, and again it's MVC UI, so instead we will do, it's not tournament, it's tracker. Tracker MVC UI.models.matchup MVC model. And with that, I think that page is done as well. There's no red dots on the right, so let's close that out. Let's look at what else is in our shared. We have our error page in shared, and it's a simple error page, where down here we have an error page, and it's a little more complicated, but it's pretty much the same thing. So let's leave our new one alone. Let's leave it with a new style. The only thing that might have to change is there might be some classes in here that are for Bootstrap 4 that aren't in Bootstrap 3. I believe these all work with 3 and 4. I think that text.danger was in 3, so that shouldn't be a problem. But just note that if you have that move over, make sure that it does support the older Bootstrap if you're going to roll back to that. So with that done, we have now moved over, let's look at our old project. We've moved over all of our views. We have not moved over our web.config. So we have this web.config, which, let's check and see if there's anything in here that we're actually using. I don't think there is. I don't see any personal settings. That's just a standard web.config. And then we also have, we've moved over our models, we've moved over our helpers, we've moved over our controllers. We have not moved our fonts over, so I have to think about that. Our content we haven't moved over. Our app start we have not moved over, because that's our bundling and our filtering and our routing. Well, that's all taken care of in a different way in our new project. We're not going to touch those. We have our favicon, which the favicon for the new site is probably fine. We haven't changed it from the defaults for the old site. That's the default for the template. So we'll leave that alone. Global ASAX, we haven't made any modifications in here that we need, so we're going to leave that alone as well. Our packages.config, this is where we have any of our references. We'll need to think about addressing some of these areas if possible. So some of these things may not come over. We may not have to bring over Antler or WebGrease. Those things may not have to come over, or they may come over differently, like this newtonsoft.json, which may not come over at all if we use the newer JSON targeting, if we need to even go that far. Web.config. This is going to need to come over. But we don't have a web.config traditionally in a .NET Core project. So what are we going to do about this? I think what we're going to do is actually bring over a web.config. Even though most of the stuff won't stay, I think what we'll do is actually bring over the app settings, including those new ones we have, and the connection strings. That way we have what we need, and I think it should load. We're going to find out real quick. So what we'll do is I'm actually going to grab one from another project. So let's go to our WinForm project and look at our app.config. And I'm going to grab this whole thing. I'm going to copy it. In fact, I'm going to copy the app.config itself. I'm going to paste that into our tracker MVC UI, which normally would not have an app.config or web.config. I'm going to paste that in, and I'm going to rename it as the web.config. These are settings are used to looking for this. Now, let's just see. It should probably fail because of a few things with our settings. Remember, we had some red squigglies. But let's just see if it will load this as it is right now. Nope, we have some build errors. So we hit no, and let's look at the build errors. The name scripts does not exist in the current context. Okay, so that's something we need to address. So I really want to get this going, but I'm getting impatient to get it going. But the reality is we're not quite done our move over yet. And so I really need to kind of take a step back and say, okay, let's do this right. So let's finish off moving things over to our www root folder. Let's start with our CSS. So I'm going to collapse down the views, and collapse down this, and go to our old site. Let's close this out as well. And I'm going to come to my content, and there's a whole bunch of files here that are CSS files. So I'm going to grab all of these and hit copy, and paste them into site.css. And it says a file in the name of site.css already exists. Do you want to replace it? Why, yes, I do. That's going to overwrite our site.css. Now, you may look at this and go, Tim, you're missing a few. If you look at content, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 files. Down here, it looks like I have 3 files. But that's because this little arrow here allows me to see that I have the map version and the min version of the Bootstrap version. So I can refer to any of those. Well, not the map. The map is what you use to get back to the non-minified version. So those are my CSS files. Now we have fonts. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste this right in a www root itself. So there's a fonts. And then we should have in here our scripts. We do. It's a whole bunch of scripts. I'm going to copy all of these. So copy. And then I'm going to come down to my JS. I'm going to paste all these scripts. And I do have a site.js still, which has nothing in it, and that's okay. I want to leave that there. Now, I didn't paste this. Let's minimize this and minimize this. I didn't paste this into the Bootstrap lib folder and the jQuery and the jQuery validation. I didn't paste them in there. I pasted it in right into JS because I'm bringing this in. These aren't really directly from the library. It's up to you if you want to put it in the Bootstrap folder and kind of overwrite this. I'm going to leave these in place. I am just going to add these over here and refer to just these, not to the lib versions. So with this, let's go modify our layout page. Now, we used to use a bundler. We're not going to use that bundler. But instead, what we're going to do is use the same style as the original. So I've copied and pasted in from what the original template had. I'm going to use this as my template for pasting in more things. So let's start with Bootstrap, bootstrap.css. I'll leave the non-minified version for now. And I also want the Bootstrap theme. So bootstrap theme.css as well. So there's our 3 CSS files actually. And then down here, instead of the scripts here, let's wipe these out. And I just remembered, did we have, now this is, I don't remember, did we have a script up here or just styles? So let's go back to our shared layout page. We did have a script. Okay, so Modernizer was up there. do we need Modernizer? We have brought it over, so we can use it. And since we are technically using it, let's bring in Modernizer. So instead of lib, I'm going to start from /js/ notice the nice IntelliSense, Modernizer. So there's Modernizer, and now I can come down here and paste in this. And down at the bottom, let's look at the ordering. This can be important. So let's go to our layout page and go to the bottom, and we had jQuery and then Bootstrap and then our scripts. So let's start with jQuery, which right now is from lib. I don't want to take it from lib because it's probably a different version of jQuery. So let's go to our JS/jQuery. We're going to bring in jQuery, the actual version. And probably with that bundle. And again, we're going to verify this by looking at our bundles. This is where knowing how your bundles work is really important. Look at our bundles for jQuery. It's just jQuery itself. jQuery validation is separate. And that's not something that we're bringing in on this page. So next one is Bootstrap, which is Bootstrap and response.js. So now we need to bring in Bootstrap. JS. That way, if we put anything in here, which is empty right now, but if you put anything in there, that will go on our page and go on our page last. So now we have this render section for scripts. And if you remember, we had some errors. In fact, our error list says the scripts does not exist in the current context. That's this right here. Well, that's a jQuery validation. So let's do this. I'm going to paste in, instead of bootstrap.js, that's jQuery.validate. And let's see if we have unobtrusive as well. So is that this one right here? Is not, oh, you need a bundle anyways. Bundle, there we go. So for jQuery validate, it's just jQuery validate star. So that means that it's jQuery validate and then anything else that's jQuery validate dot. So we only have jQuery validate. We do have jQuery validate dot unobtrusive.js and jQuery validate -vs doc. So this is a jQuery validate plugin, the VS doc is, and the unobtrusive looks like it's also part of jQuery validate. So what we're going to do is bring those in as well. So let's copy this and we'll do it again, but this time for validate, we're going to say validate dot unobtrusive.js, and we're also going to bring in jQuery validate -vs doc. So all three of those instead of this render the jQuery bundle. Now we can go back to our error list and look at the next one, paste in the rate values, and now we have a styles issue, which actually we need to do a build because it looks like it's remembering old ones. So let's, on our MVC UI, we're going to do a build, and let's see what results from the build. We only have 2 errors left, and it looks like they're probably the same error. So there we go. Now we should do a build again just for our MVC UI. and make sure that it runs. It does. So now let's run this and see what happens. And it says object reference not set to an instance of an object for our Git. But I think that we're getting a little farther. And I think that we've got all of our stuff moved over and even a little bit of early tweaking done. So what we're going to do now, I'm going to close all documents here. Now I'm going to take this project offline. We should have everything from this project now, the old MVC UI. So I'm going to just unload it for now. And now what we're going to do is we're going to move on to debugging why this doesn't work. Because it sounds like, or it feels like, this is probably now an upgrade issue where you have some path issues or something else that might be a problem. So we're going to do that in the next video.